Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
These are young people who study in our schools, they play in our neighborhoods, they're friends with our kids, they pledge allegiance to our flag. They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper.
2 months after President Obama announces a halt to deportations of some undocumented youth, a group of activists have infiltrated the nation's immigration jails and say they've found dozens of young people still being held who should be released. We'll speak with DREAM activist Marco Saavedra, just released from detention. Then to Richmond, California, where over 900 residents have sought medical care after a massive fire at a Chevron oil refinery. We'll speak with the Richmond mayor, one of the only Green Party mayors in the country, as well as local activist Andres Soto of Communities for a Better Environment.
The Richmond refinery is the single largest producer of greenhouse gases in the state of California. Now, don't stay in Richmond. The gases move through the Carquinez Straits. They go into the Central Valley, and Fresno and Bakersfield actually have worse air than L.A.
And Texas executes Marvin Wilson, his IQ just 61.
This is absolutely a pattern in Texas. They have resisted the Supreme Court's rulings on mental retardation for decades, and in this case have usurped the Supreme Court's ruling by defining mental retardation their own way outside of the scientific community.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The former girlfriend of the gunman who carried out the massacre at a Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, Sunday has been detained after an unauthorized gun was allegedly found in her home. Misty Cook, a 31-year-old waitress and nursing student with reported ties to white supremacist groups, worked at a restaurant a block from the temple where her ex-boyfriend, Wade Michael Page, killed 6 people. She and Page reportedly broke up earlier this summer. Misty Cook was arrested Tuesday on suspicion of being a felon in possession of a firearm. Photos show her posing with members of the white supremacist group Volksfront and wearing a Volksfront T-shirt. The couple were reportedly both active in an online message forum for white supremacist groups. Meanwhile, a researcher who closely studied Wade Michael Page while researching hate music in Southern California several years ago has provided new details about the shooter's background. In an interview published on the Huffington Post, University of Nebraska at Omaha criminology professor Pete Simi said Page had a drinking problem and often struggled to get to work and pay his share of rent and food. He emphasized the importance of music in Page's life, describing him as a, quote, independent neo-Nazi skinhead who saw his musical involvement as his main form of activism. In an email exchange with the shooter after the 9/11 attacks, Simi said Page appeared, quote, very angry about Muslims and said something to the effect of America needing to go over to the Middle East and bomb them all. But Simi said Page's hate rhetoric was generally targeted toward Jewish people and non-whites, specifically African Americans. Simi says Page's military service strongly influenced his neo-Nazi identification, in part because he saw whites in the Army as victims of reverse discrimination. Page reportedly told Simi, quote, if you don't go into the military as a racist, you definitely leave as one. Arizona shooter Jared Loughner has pleaded guilty over the rampage in Tucson last year that killed 6 people and wounded 13 others, including former Democratic Congressmember Gabrielle Giffords. Under a plea deal, Loughner will spend the rest of his life in prison with no chance of parole. Arizona District Attorney John Leonardo said prosecutors decided not to seek the death penalty due to the state of Loughner's mental health.
The doctors who have treated and observed Mr. Loughner since the shooting agree that he suffered from a severe mental illness, that is, severe schizophrenia, at the time of the shooting and before the shooting. Mr. Loughner's condition was not diagnosed nor treated. In deciding to allow this plea agreement, not only the defendant's past and current mental state, but Also, the fragility of his continued competency to stand trial was taken into account.
Loeffner was initially declared unfit to stand trial after undergoing psychiatric evaluation. Prosecutors say they reached the plea deal in consultation with the shooting survivors and the victims' families. Shooting victim Susie Hallman said she backs the plea deal.
Today's events make me very proud to be an American. This was the system. This was the system doing its best. It's not a perfect solution. The perfect solution is one that we can't have. What we want is not available to us. This is the best that can be expected.
New details have been released, meanwhile, on the warnings from a University of Colorado psychiatrist about Aurora shooting suspect James Holmes. Dr. Lynn Fenton has previously said she warned University of Colorado officials about Holmes, whom she'd treated before he wound up dropping out of school. According to ABC News, Fenton now also claims she alerted a campus police officer. The University of Colorado has hired a former federal prosecutor to review its handling of Holmes' case before the shooting. Holmes is accused of killing 12 people and wounding dozens more in a shooting rampage at an Aurora movie theater last month. Syrian government forces have launched a long-awaited ground assault on the besieged city of Aleppo after weeks of clashes. Heavy fighting has already broken out in the frontline district of Salaheddin, with reports of many casualties. On Tuesday, the head of the UN supervision mission in Syria, Babakar Gaye, said the fighting in Aleppo has forced international observers to temporarily pull back.
Extremely concerned about the continued violence in Syria, in particular the significant deterioration in Aleppo and its impact on the civilian population. In that regard, I urge the parties to protect civilians and respect their obligations under international humanitarian law. And I want to strongly stress that civilians must not be subjected to shelling and use of heavy weapons.
The intensified fighting in Aleppo comes as the Syrian regime received public backing Tuesday from visiting Iranian senior official Saeed Jalili. At a meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, Assad's first public appearance in 2 weeks, Jalili called the fighting in Syria a battle against regional and global enemies. Speaking meanwhile on a visit to South Africa, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton repeated her calls for a political transition in Syria.
It is a very difficult time for the people of Syria who are caught in this terrible violence. But I hope that we will look at the urgent tasks that I think confront the people of Syria and the international community and think through how we can address them. First, we must figure out ways to hasten the day when the bloodshed ends and the political transition begins.
Egyptian airstrikes have killed at least 20 people in the Sinai, close to the border with Israel. Egypt says it's acting against militants who killed 16 border guards along the border on Sunday as they ate a meal breaking the Ramadan fast. In Bahrain, 15 police officers have been charged with mistreatment of medics during the U.S.-backed crackdown on opposition protests. In June, the sentences were upheld for 9 medics who were part of an original group of 20 sentenced for treating demonstrators. They were handed jail terms of between 1 month to 5 years. The new charges against the officers stem from a government-backed probe convened following heavy international criticism. In the Philippines, tens of thousands have fled the capital, Manila, to escape a devastating flood. Heavy waters have submerged most of the city, with over 80% of Manila affected. Some 800,000 people have been displaced so far. President Obama's unveiled an additional $30 million in federal aid to combat the nation's worst drought in 25 years. Nearly 2/3 of the contiguous United States has been found to be in moderate to exceptional drought, ravaging fields and driving up the price of basic staples. On Tuesday, President Obama unveiled the new aid and called on Congress to approve a farm bill assisting rural areas.
It is a historic drought, and it's having a profound impact on farmers and ranchers all across many states. Now, at my direction, the Department of Agriculture, led by Secretary Vilsack, has been working with every other agency across the federal government to make sure that we are taking every single possible step to help farmers and ranchers to fight back and recover from this disaster. Obviously, Congress has a role here. Congress needs to pass a farm bill that will not only provide important disaster relief tools, but also make necessary reforms and give farmers the certainty that they deserve.
The private military firm formerly known as Blackwater has agreed to a fine of $7.5 million to settle a number of federal criminal charges surrounding weapons smuggling worldwide. Blackwater, now known as Academy, was accused of violations including possessing unregistered automatic weapons, lying to arms regulators about foreign sales, and illegal shipments overseas. 2 years ago, Blackwater paid a $42 million fine for actions including illegal weapons exports to Afghanistan, making unauthorized proposals to train troops in South Sudan, and providing sniper training for Taiwanese police officers. In a news release announcing the payment of the fines, Blackwater initially claimed the settlement, quote, does not involve any guilty plea or admitting to any violations. But after being reminded of a clause barring it from contradicting any aspect of the agreement publicly, Blackwater issued a clarification saying, quote, there is a distinction between an admission of events taking place and an admission of guilt. A basic training instructor with the U.S. Air Force has been sentenced to 30 days in jail after being convicted of improper sexual misconduct amidst the worst military scandal in more than 15 years. Technical Sergeant Christopher Smith is one of 7 trainers at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, to be accused of sexual misconduct, with charges ranging from rape to fraternizing with female trainees. Smith was convicted last week of seeking an intimate relationship with a female trainee and fraternizing with another. He was acquitted of other counts, including obstructing justice. In the most serious of the charges stemming from the investigation, a military jury gave Staff Sergeant Luis Walker a 20-year sentence last month for rape and sexual assault. Occupy Wall Street activists and members of a group calling itself Dos Países Una Voz, of 2 countries, 1 voice, held direct action yesterday to support the Mexican movement Yo Soy 132 and condemn the Mexican business magnate Carlos Slim. Juan Jose Gutierrez was among the protesters calling for U.S. activists to join the movement against Slim.
All we want is to ask the American people to join our effort to stop Carlos Slim predatory and monopolistic practices, which is causing great suffering and great underdevelopment to the nation of Mexico and the rest of Latin America.
The protests kicked off a week of actions against Carlos Slim, the world's richest man, who's under criticism for his involvement in the contested presidential election of pre-candidate Enrique Peña Nieto. Occupy Wall Street protesters are targeting businesses in New York City that Slim owns portions of, including Saks Fifth Avenue and the New York Times. Activist Daphne Carr said the action is part of Occupy Wall Street's solidarity with movements around the world.
Occupy Wall Street has been working with a lot of different community groups all around the world, and I think that this action today is just part of larger solidarity building between different action groups, unions, immigrants groups who are finding specific ways to target wealthy individuals, institutions, and other practices that need serious modification or real radical change.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around